Hello and welcome back. You know what? I'm getting tired of console logs. I want to see some data on my screen. So in this video, we're going to do a couple things to take the generated user that we just had created in our service layer, our fake backend return response, and I want to show it maybe down below here. We're going to do that a couple ways, and so let's go through this journey. So I want to possibly come up, let's go and add to our signup control, and we're going to add to the props of this a callback function. So like on created, we're going to pass back a function. They're going to have to pass in a function. It's going to return void or nothing to us. We don't really care what our parent does with this function once we call it. And we're going to pass in a new user, and it's going to follow our same API user response create method. So we're just going to pass that in here. And if I come down to where we actually created that user right here, instead of logging it out, I'm just going to go props.onCreated and put the response in there, and it should be happy. So now if we go back to our dashboard, we're going to have an error because we do not have that required prop that's being passed in there. So we're going to say on created, and we're going to have handle created user. And I go and hit Alt Enter, create that function, create there. Notice it doesn't add automatically everything that we want there because it's not making an assumption of whether you care to listen to that parameter, but we do. So created user, and notice I can't just force it to be something else like a Boolean. It'll complain down here that it doesn't match the signature. Boolean is not equal to the new user. So api.user.response.create. So now we're happy. And what I want to do is I want to store that into a state variable. So I come up here, type in state, and do new user, set new user, and we'll bring this guy in, and we'll do api.user.response.create. And so technically, if I don't pass in anything here, this new user is really either, it doesn't show here, but it's either this value, or since I didn't pass anything in, it's also possibly undefined. So a lot of times I like to just say, just for clarity, that this thing can be undefined. And so I'm going to pass in so in the handle create user, I'm just going to call set new user of the created user. So now it's stored in the state of this dashboard. By setting it, it's going to cause the dashboard to re-render. And I'm going to make a new component. I'm going to go up and create a component called, let's see here, new user display, for lack of better words. Create a new file, new user display.tsx, capital new. Right there, I don't really care about adding it to Git right now. And so I'll do a new component and new user display. And again, I will always kind of create, you don't have to do this, but it's kind of a good habit to get into the SCSS file that goes along with this, and do SCSS, so new user display. And so the props that we're going to take in is going to be new user, and it's going to be of this api.user.response.create, or we'll say it can be undefined. Could possibly be we didn't create a user yet. So what we're going to do here is we're going to basically kind of do a check on the new user. So if we're going to say props.newUser, if we have that, we're going to render a new user. New user data, sure. Call it as a function. Alt, Control Alt Enter, and we render that user out. Now, this you can technically check to see whether it's there or not, but sometimes you'll get undefineds to show up in your HTML if it's undefined and it was something that's possibly true. So what we like to do is force this to a Boolean property by doing the double bang. So a single bang will take new user, we'll flip it so it'll say false or true, and then we will flip it back again so that it's correct. So we're essentially coalescing this to a Boolean value. In here, our return response, I want to say, we're going to maybe do a label, and we're going to have a variant of, I don't know, maybe a body type, and we're going to say props.newUser.name. Well, notice that it has these question marks. That's because it thinks that this function, this function isn't smart enough to know, like, hey, I already checked that new user wasn't that it is a true, good, valid value by the time we got here. And so it doesn't know that, and so it's trying to protect you by doing these question marks. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just take that and just kind of do this check. I know it's superfluous, it's not needed, but I'm just gonna say, hey, if I don't have it, return. Now I don't need this question mark there. So we're gonna say there, I'm gonna put a margin bottom of 8 pixels and do this a couple times. Since I'm having multiple values in here, React needs you to return some parent to it. And so you can do that with, these are called React fragments, and you can return a parent so that you can return an array of values where there's one parent value to that. And we're going to say primary email, and maybe I'll put ID on this first one. And just to show you, we can do like an H6, so it's a little bit bigger. All right, that should show our new display. Going back to the dashboard, let's add this. So new user display, look at how it auto completes that. We're going to pass a new user, and we should be good there. Let's go to React. Okay, I found my error. So I accidentally pushed a space when I was making this file, so this is actually really good. You can right click on your file and say refactor, rename the file, or shift F6, and I'm going to take that pesky little space out in front of that one. And so now I can take the space out there, save it, come back to here, and there we go. So we have nothing displayed down there, but if we type jim@jones.com, oh, actually, name is Jim, hit enter, we have our value 380, our email, our name down there. But if you look at that, what did we have to do in the entire scheme of things? What we had to do is we had to essentially have a callback function, an onCreate, where we pass back the user, and we had to send it up to the parent, store it off, send it back down to a child for it to be displayed there, because the sign-up control and the new user display are both siblings to each other. So the only way is to do this prop pushing up to a parent and prop drilling back down to the new user. That can get kind of really annoying when you have a lot of values that kind of need to be shared among components and stuff. And so what we've done here at Red Sky is we've made heavy use of a project called Recoil.js. So it's another Facebook project called Recoil, and you can kind of read all about it right here, what Recoil is and all that kind of stuff. But we built a nice little code structure around it that we just call global state, but underneath it uses Recoil and as much of the Recoil stuff as we possibly can. So what we have now is, if we wanted to eliminate this process of passing things up, is we would go to our, let me close up all these, we'd go to our state and to our global state file. And here we have a global state class that we export and use. And then we have the values of different things that we want to store into this state, this global kind of variable state there. And in this case, maybe we want to store the new user data. So we'll just kind of say, add up here a key, new user data, new, doesn't really matter what this is, but you just have to have it, new user data. And then we'd come down here and we'd say new user data. It's a recoil state, so instead of just a regular state, it's recoil. We're going to say it's an api.user.response.create, or it's undefined. So we added this value here, and we come down, and I typically like to just kind of copy these, but right now I'll just kind of type it all the way out. So new user state equals an atom, that's a recoil atom, api.user.response.create, or undefined. And we will pass in this option struct. So the way it works is you have your default value and your key. So that key is that enum above that we typed, so new user data, and we're going to default it to undefined. If we wanted to have this thing stored off so that if we refreshed our screen or the site, and if we wanted to pull it out of the user's browser's local storage, we could just add the key to this list. So I'd just say global state.new user, and on the default value, instead of saying it's undefined, we would call this function and say go ahead and load this, and we'd give it the key that it would try to find in the local storage, and the type, and the default value if it wasn't there, and it would just kind of automatically handle storing out values as they change, and when you refresh the page, pulling it back in. But in this case, I'm just going to say it's undefined by default, and I don't really need it in this key list down here. So that should set up all of the stuff that we need for the global state. I'm going to go back to the sign up control, and now I'm going to remove this prop. So we're not going to pass this up through a prop anymore, which gives me an error down here. And I'm going to import a hook right here that's a custom hook, part of Recoil, and it's going to be the constant, it's going to be a setter, because I don't need a value of it at all. This thing doesn't care what the value of it is. It only cares about what to be able to set it for somebody else to listen to it. So I'm going to do a set new user data equals use set recoil state, and I'm just going to search for that global state, and I can find the new user data from there. Again, we like to keep our types nice and strongly typed, and so I'm going to say this is api.user.response.create or undefined. And so now I have a function that I can set it when it's ready. So I can say set, and there's my response data down there. So that will set the recoil. What's cool about Recoil is when you set it, anybody that's listening to it with another hook for the value will actually automatically get re-rendered. So if we come back to our dashboard page, we'll see, hey, it doesn't know about this onCreated, so I can delete that out. We don't really need to handle the onCreated, and we don't even need this user that we had anymore. We're actually going to come down into the new user display. We're going to remove it from a prop, and we're going to come in here and say constant new user data equals use recoil, and instead of the state, we're going to say value, and we're just going to say global state dot new user data, and again, strong type checks on everything that we do. The response, create, or undefined, and we basically change everywhere where there's this props.newUser to the new user data there. And so if we come back now to the dashboard, we don't need this new user, and if everything's good, we should be able to refresh here. Looks like use state is defined but never used. Warning, Oh, this thing is compiled, showing warnings. All right, so come down here, Jim Jones, jim@jones.com. There we go. We have 439, that there, and that there. So if you look at it, it's so much cleaner. You don't have the extra state up there. You don't have the extra handle that you had down there. You don't have a ton of stuff that you needed. And now these controls kind of can independently only worry about the things that they care about. For example, the new user display only cared about the value if it changed. The sign-up control only cared about setting that value. And so the nice thing is the sign-up control, when that value does change, it doesn't need to re-render or do anything fun like that. It just cares about setting it. I hope this was helpful. This is a very key part to how we do our projects with React and Recoil in Red Sky. So hopefully this was helpful. Ask questions again, but we'll continue on from here. Thanks.